What is the creepiest or most unexplained event that you have ever experienced? Story 1. Only had one that was truly beyond me. I was 19 at the time. Buddy of mine was on leave in the USMC visiting. Going to sleep, I let him sleep in my bed and I took the couch. The couch was on those L-shaped sectionals. The short part of the L was at my feet and there was an ottoman in front of the couch in the little area. Had one of those weird sleeps where I woke up before opening my eyes. When I opened them, I saw a creature standing right next to the ottoman, like within arm's length. There was a light on in the hallway, so it was like a silhouette from the light behind it. Not enough light from the streetlight to make it super clear from the window behind me. It was about 3 or 4 feet tall. All I can remember from its features is it had super greasy hair covering most of its face. I saw it as soon as I opened my eyes and I just closed my eyes back shut and turned around to face the back of the couch. I don't know how to describe it, but it was like the moment I saw it, my entire body was filled with terror. As soon as I turned around, I heard like a loud whisper in my ear. I saw you saw me, don't act like you didn't. Even more terrified. I just stayed silent, didn't move, and basically was praying until I eventually fell asleep. At some point I heard my body wake up and use the bathroom and lay back down. I probably would have forgotten about it except the next morning when eating breakfast, my friend mentioned how he woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and felt like the house was haunted. Gave me the heebie-jeebies. I've had sleep paralysis, lucid dreams, false awakened dreams, and this wasn't like any of those. The only truly supernatural thing I ever saw that I couldn't explain away. Story 2. My grandparents lived in the middle of nowhere in Florida, and I spent a lot of time with them because my parents were super young and weren't really up for the whole parenting thing. About half-mile from their house was a creek I would always walk up and down looking for small fish to catch and release. One day I was climbing a berm next to the creek, and when I crossed to the top I saw a dark-haired woman in a white dress leaning over the water crying to herself. The nearest house was my grandparents and their neighbor was another mile down the road, so there was no reason this random woman should be in the middle of an isolated forest. I just sat there for a minute watching her, hiding behind the berm. After a couple minutes, she suddenly stands up and lets out a blood-curdling scream. Obviously, I absolutely shit my pants and booked it back to my grandparents' house. But I don't think it was paranormal or anything, just very unusual. Most likely a woman who was lost and wandered into the woods. My grandma called the cops, but seeing as it was the middle of nowhere, it took FSP 6 hours to show up, so whoever it was long gone by that point. I've told this story here before and someone informed me about a folk tale about La Llorona, which does fit pretty well with what I saw, but I still think it was just a lost woman. Story 3. Not long after my husband and I were newly married, he was taking a shower in our suite bathroom while I was in the laundry room. He yells for me, and when I got to see what he needed, he asked what I was just doing in there. I tell him I've been in the laundry room. He says he saw a woman through the shower curtain. He makes me promise not tell anyone because he thinks they'll think he's crazy. I don't say a word, and a few weeks later my sister and nephews come to stay for the weekend. The youngest was about 4 years at the time. My husband goes someplace with his dad and brother, and it's after dark. My nephew is watching TV while my sister and I are in the kitchen. The hallway leading from the kitchen goes to my room. My bedroom door is closed, and my nephew says, "I thought you said Uncle was gone." We ask him what he means, and he tells us that he saw someone come through my bedroom door. Needless to say, I didn't go back to our room till my husband came home, and we then told my sister about the woman in the bathroom. Story 4. Me and someone I used to know in high school way back met to catch up. We were talking about our views on religion at some park. When we were walking back to our car, some guy said he had overheard us. We interacted a little and then went to our cars. I told her how awkward I felt knowing he overheard everything. She looked at me and said, "He?" After some comparing notes, we realized we'd seen and heard entirely different people. She'd seen an elderly woman. I'd seen a middle-aged man. Only problem is we only talked to one person. Story 5. I am not a superstitious person, nor do I believe in magic, psychic powers, or anything of the sort. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for this, but I haven't figured it out. That, or it's a sleepy-brained coincidence. When I was a little girl, I had a babysitter. Let's call her Delilah, and Delilah's mother worked as my family's housekeeper. Delilah looked after me all the time, so I knew her face very well. Years later, when I was a teenager and hadn't seen Delilah in a few years, I woke up groggy one morning and looked out the window into the front driveway and saw Delilah walking toward the house, visibly pregnant. I remember thinking, oh, good for her, congrats. I assumed she was stopping by to say hi to my parents and expected to see her and catch up once I was up and about. But when I left my room, she was nowhere to be seen. So I just assumed she left quickly and didn't think much of it. The next day her mother came by to do the housekeeping and I said something like, oh, I saw Delilah yesterday. I didn't know she was pregnant. Congrats. To which her mother stared at me and said, Delilah's in Australia. She has been for like 3 months. I was confused because I had been sure it was Delilah and we had a long drive away, so it didn't make much sense for a random woman to be walking up so close to the front door. But I assumed I must have been mistaken. I did get a chance to see her and catch up with her once she came back from Australia, and as it turned out, she was pregnant. Story 6. I was raised off-grid on an uninhabited mountain except for my family. We were the first established homestead on that mountain ever, and first residents since the early 1900s miners left. The log home we built was located about a half a mile down from a deserted mining camp. There is still little published history recording that camp's journey up there or who mined there. It was in operation roughly 15 years and boasts about 9 cabins. The camp has traded hands many times since I was a child. I used to hike to it and play around the cabins. I remember in the most intact cabin there had been a notebook. I read passages from not only the current owner, but also one of the past owners recounting tales of the little blue girl. Later, I had found remnants of an old children's fort built with a 1900s handmade cabin door hanging a mistletoe fir tree for a treehouse. One night when we all came home, one fall evening, as we entered through the mudroom into the house, we all heard a strange noise. We looked at the front door going to the front porch, and the deadbolt was locking and unlocking very fast. It takes some muscle to lock and unlock a deadbolt. It quit. I said, Mom? She walked up to the front door, opened it, and there was nothing there. She shut the door, the deadbolt locked and unlocked, and remained still. It was just the wind, she said, and it never happened again. Years later, in my mid-20s, I was taking a family friend for a horseback ride. We walked alone, enjoying the early spring day and the horses, chatting about whatever came to mind. Suddenly, about 40 yards off, we heard a little girl laugh loudly. My friend smiled and said, "Oh, you have children up here." I shook my head and replied, "No, we don't. There isn't another soul for a few miles. No children until well after that." She seemed to turn a bit pale, then asked, "Well, what was that?" I stayed quiet. I thought I knew what it was, that I had had my first encounter with the little blue girl, but not wanting to spook my friend or sound crazy, I just said, "I don't know." We continued our ride and had no issue. One more weird thing about my mountain is not very often, but out of the blue I have experienced this really awful feeling, like something evil is close. I was having a chat with an older gent who is an avid outdoorsman, an overall tough guy who owns property up there, and we started talking about strange happenings up there. I asked him about the evil feeling, thinking he'd laugh at me and poke fun, but to my surprise he got dead serious. He recounted the time he was in his cabin, and in his own words, he ain't scared of shit. All of a sudden he said it was like the darkness outside got even darker, and he became terrified. He said the hairs of his arms stood up, and he had half a mind to get in his truck and leave. He admitted he had never felt like that before, and was glad I said something because he thought maybe something was wrong with him. He mentioned it had lasted about 10 to 15 minutes, but felt like an eternity. We have no clue what that is. Let me know your stories in the comments to be part of a future video. Like and subscribe to be notified of new uploads. And click on this video to hear more stories.